Hello? Hi. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Nice to meet you. I'm Adam. Can you see me and hear me okay?
I can. It was cutting
Great.
out a little bit, but I think it's good now.
Yeah, I had that for a split second with you as well.
Yeah, I don't
But
know.
so far so good though. How are you? Nice to meet you. I'm Adam.
Hi, Adam. Yeah, nice to meet you too. I'm all right. You know,
Mm-hmm. I like your
surviving.
blouse. I like the
Oh, thank
pattern.
you.
It's a nice pattern.
Thank you. It's unusual, which is why I liked it. Yeah, surviving COVID. Where are you?
I am in the Hudson Valley. So north of New York City, about
Oh, yeah.
70, 80 miles north of New York City.
Right.
Yeah. I'm from New York City, but we're going to talk about that because this Fredrik Gertten who's joining us.
Here
It's
he is.
thrilling for me personally. I love Fredrik and his films.
Well, you have to say that. Yeah, you have to say that now that he's actually.
No, he heard it. Did you hear
it.
me complimenting you, Fredrik?
So sweet. I love it. I love you too.
You know, I've been following you forever and finally got you on this podcast. It's nice.
This is the first time you've met Fredrik and you've loved him for so long?
No, we've met him. We've met.
Okay.
We've met, but it's first time that we've managed to do this through Bananas. Big Boys Go Bananas. I think we talked at Bikes. I want to say we talked during Bikes vs. Cars.
When it was in South by Southwest, maybe?
Yeah. I'm not sure, but
I was also in LA with that one, so I don't, yeah, but we've met and
Cars
I know.
versus Bikes, I guess it's
yeah. Bikes versus Cars.
Regardless, hi. Where are you guys?
I'm in Sweden, Malmö, Sweden.
Okay, so actually it's 6 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Leilani?
I'm in Canada, in the capital, Ottawa.
Very nice. Very
Small,
nice.
nowhere town.
A small nowhere town.
Maybe, is that what time zone is Ottawa?
It's the same as New York.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah. I'm not that far from you, you know.
Well, we always think about, right, I mean, the common the sense is that it is Ontario, right? That's, you know, because of the Toronto-New York kind of connection, if you will. But yeah, that's great. I was about to tell Leilani that I moved to the Hudson Valley in June. It's actually something I've been wanting to do. And people say, you know, was it the COVID-19? I said, well, it was maybe the last straw that helped the timing of it.
Right.
But truthfully, and this goes to the heart of Push, your documentary, but I feel like New York left me some time ago. And I have been thinking deeply about the issues of this documentary for a very, very long time. And I'll just finish my thought by saying, and then I'll turn it to you guys, but that 8 or 9 years ago, there was a bunch of documentaries that came out in Brooklyn and New York about what was happening with, you know, real estate, with gentrification, with zoning, rezoning, and development in New York City. And, you know, I realized this is a bigger issue than just one film or 2 films. And I put together a series under the Filmwax film series, which is no longer a thing, but called Brooklyn Reconstructed. And we got the use of the Ethical Society for Brooklyn building on Prospect Park. They lent us the building once a month. And we had invited people from the community to come. And we, you know, the films were wonderful, but where the real action, the magic was happening was after those screenings. And we had religious leaders, you know, local politicians, other community leaders, you name it. People came and did these incredible Q&As. That was 9 years ago, and it's only gotten more steroidal, for lack of another word. So your film, I was grateful because it just said what I've been walking around thinking about in terms of our cities for a long time.
That's good.
Sorry for the long
That's great. Thank you.
intro, but yeah. Um,
Adam, this film is also my journey to understand, my journey to try to connect the dots, because I've also seen all these stories and I've also seen all these documentaries, and they're all important and they all tell an important story.
right.
But I'm still been trying to get into my own head. How does this function? What are the connections between all? So the journey here is try to connect dots, and of course Leilani has been an amazing main character, like an amazing private detective in the
Yeah.
film, in this kind of what the fuck is going on. Sorry for bad language,
That's
but what is
okay.
going on? It's and I'm not an academic, so this doesn't start off with a book I've read. So it's actually a journey out with questions. Why are prices going up? Why are people all over the world under so much stress? And it's like it's not only in the big cities, also in smaller cities, and not only in the US or the UK. It's everywhere. It's also the same in Africa, Latin America, and Asia.
Yeah, I was really.
So, and we also found out quite early that the term gentrification is something we should maybe stop using, because this,
right.
as Saskia says, it's much deeper than that.
Right.
You know,
I've been, one thing I was realizing when people would call what was going on in New York, which is my own personal experience, although I know anecdotally this was happening in from friends in Oakland and New Orleans and many other cities, but that there is an organic type of gentrification, right? Which, for better or for worse, is part of the world or our cities, and always has been, right? But what we were experiencing in the last couple of decades is not that. It's something very something much more plotted out. You know,
it's much more
It's
aggressive.
built.
it's very aggressive. It's very aggressive.
And it's this enormous amounts of money that's all the time goes in and grabs whatever they can, and it's always in order to push the prices up in very short time.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I agree with all of that. There is something absolutely purposeful about financialization, and it has nothing to do with neighborhoods or communities. So whereas, I mean, we can debate whether gentrification is good or bad, whatever, but it is about community and neighborhood, and even if it's not our vision of community and neighborhood. But financialization is not about community, neighborhood, people. It's about finance, profit, shareholders, hiding corrupt money often. That's what it's about, and growing capital. So to name it as gentrification is not only just like bad, sloppy language, it actually does a disservice to understanding the phenomenon and then addressing it and coming up with solutions.
Yeah, well, it does a service to those who are who are sort of the bad guys here, because they can just say, they could just shrug and say, this has always been going on.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you say there,
yeah.
then you start to point fingers towards the gentrifier. And who's the gentrifier? It's the guy who is toasting his own coffee from Nicaragua. It's like the yoga studio.
Yeah.
It's the barista who's to blame for the development in a town. It's such a silly thing, you know.
Yep.
I mean, small time entrepreneurs is what makes cities lively and great to live in. We should praise them. But when a community is making their neighborhood more beautiful and more lively, the value of that creation should stay within the community. Now these forces are jumping in, grabbing and extracting the value created by the community. And that's not okay. And we have to fight back, push back.
You mentioned Leilani is your subject, or, well, in form of a person anyway. Obviously, we've been talking about the broader subject, but Leilani, you are the UN Special Rapporteur, right? What is a rapporteur as opposed to a reporter?
First of all, for clarity's sake, I am the former UN Special Rapporteur.
Thank you.
My mandate ended at the end of April.
Okay.
Yeah. And what is a UN rapporteur? So you're appointed by governments from around the world who sit in the United Nations. And your job, or my job, was to really monitor whether people were living in dignity in terms of their housing conditions, and to try to get governments to meet their obligations in that regard. So where I'm seeing homelessness in affluent countries, where I'm seeing informal settlements and people not having showers and toilets, one, you sort of, the job is to document that. That's evidence of human rights infractions. And then the other part of the job is to hold governments accountable and to write reports explaining what the right to housing looks like, what it means, how it can be implemented.
How did you get that gig?
I applied. It's a job. It's an unpaid job. They don't pay you. They don't pay you, but I did apply. It's just like a job. You have to have the credentials, but you just apply.
Were your at least cost? I mean, obviously you traveled the world, so that was all. They pay for that, right? So they're under
some
right?
of it. Some of it.
Oh, okay. So
the
you
official, they pay for official. So I had to go to 2 countries every year, that like official visits. So I've been to every region of the world. I went to India and Egypt and Chile and South Korea. You see some of it in the film. That's Fredrik was coming with me on some of those official visits. And then I did like a whole series of unofficial visits. Also, you see in the film, unofficial visit to Toronto, to New York, etc. So, and that's the only way that's one of the hardest things now about COVID, is not being able to go into people's homes, because that's how you learn the most, for sure.
Right. Yeah. I didn't even start to think about that. And so how did you two meet up then? Fredrik, were you already had your idea and then you were introduced to Leilani, or?
I had the idea, and I was researching, and my research is quite a lot on Twitter. So I follow people and I follow stories, and I actually found Leilani on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
And then after maybe half a year or so, there was something that caught me in an interview with Leilani from a Vancouver magazine. And that was the word financialization. That's what it was, a word I didn't know about. I haven't heard it. I have still a problem to pronounce it. but it's...
Is there a Swedish equivalent?
But yeah, financialisering. It's still, you know, it made something, because it made me curious. And then of course, then I wrote to Leilani and asked if we could have a Skype. And you know, it's a good way of testing if the camera could like her. And
of course, I did not know that. I did not know that was what was going on.
The jury said yes, and and then I asked if she was coming over to Europe, and we met in London. And the first time we met was actually in the home of Saskia Sassen in London.
Who is one of the
yeah, she's a professor at Columbia, but she's also at the London School of Economics. So she's like a very high
ranking.
One of the best, strongest intellectuals in the world. She's like top 100 of intellectuals. So we met at their home.
I have to check that list to see if I'm in there myself.
Yeah, please do. I mean, you can start from the top, because A is like early.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries. No, but that's how we started. And we filmed a few days in London, and I felt that this was going well. I went back to my editor. We tried to edit and check where are we going. And Leilani then said she was going on this official mission to Chile. I have worked a lot in South America. I speak Spanish, so I decided to go with her. And then I went to Chile. We filmed for like, I think 10 days. And then we went up to Toronto, filmed a little bit. And with those 3 stops, I started to edit some material so I could start to finance the project, which is always a journey, you know that. But when you do a documentary, the main character is really important. And most funders also fell in love with Leilani. So I owe her a lot. So I'm really happy to have found her. And it's probably, I made many films, and it's probably the best character I ever had. You know, it's like And it's complicated because it's a global story. So you need somebody who can speak into the global situation in many places. And she had a very special role. And it's not a film about the UN Special Rapporteur. It's actually about something else. It's about trying to understand what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And we know, we are hearing a lot about all these empty apartments in New York City, for instance. Again, I just bring it up as my own personal example. It could be many other cities around the world, but and they're not empty because people like myself uprooted and left New York City, although maybe that explains a very tiny percentage of apartments, but mostly they're just used as, is it just a matter of their investments?
Yeah.
From you know,
Yep.
I mean,
the
basically
Emirate.
the population in Manhattan has shrunken. There is less people living in Manhattan now than before. So the people still there are people living in social housing, and then it's the uber wealthy who don't really stay there a lot of empty spaces. And so it's like that kind of pattern. We can see that from the center of Amsterdam. We can see it from the center of Barcelona. We see it in city after city. A lot of empty buildings. It's also, of course, also short-term leasing, Airbnb hotels, and so on. So it's different sectors, but it's sad. I mean, when I go to New York City now, to Manhattan, I feel like the city has lost its soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in New York first time in the 80s, so I've seen it in different periods. And it's like, so they are extracting not only values, but also the community life, the story of the city is getting lost. And that's the chapter we have also from London about Kensington, you know, where this Grenfell building was in the middle of, when it was constructed, in the middle of a slum area. And now it's surrounded with apartments that are worth like $5 million. You know, and most of them stand empty. You know, Michael Bloomberg also built big house very close to the Grenfell building in London, for example, and a lot of other famous people. But I mean, they don't spend so much time there. It's just a way to park money.
And Leilani, what are you doing now, since that position is, well, now you're an ambassador for Fredrik's film?
I've always been an ambassador for Fredrik's film and will always be. But so I'm the global director of an organization called The Shift, and where the aim of The Shift is to secure the right to housing and create a movement around the right to housing. So that's what I do. I spend my time trying to convince governments and others that housing is a human right, and it can be, in fact, treated that way, and the sky won't fall in, or whatever the expression is, if they do so. In fact, they'll make people happier and places happier, better places to be. So I mean, it's a daunting thing, because it's like, you know, the issue is global, and so I felt there needed to be a global response. I'm really taking head on the issue of financialization, although I have to deal with a whole gamut of issues, as you can imagine. Excuse me, because everything is interrelated. So when you're seeing in New York street homelessness, there's a direct line that can be drawn to financialization. It's unfortunate that more people aren't drawing that line. Right. But I draw that line. Fredrik draws the line. The film draws the line. So
yes, right.
My work requires that.
Where is everybody? Where are these people? Where are the people going?
Where did they come from? I find that a more interesting question to begin with. Where did these people come from? And it's not what people think. I mean, yes, there will be people with drug addiction and disability on the streets, of course. But there's a lot of people who are working and sleeping in their cars. There are students. Fredrik and I we have a podcast now called Pushback Talks. And we did one about vulture funds moving into student housing and the situation students find themselves in. And the students are living in their cars in your country, trying to get an education. I mean, These lines have to be drawn right back to the big guys, to the private equity firms, to the pension funds, to the insurance companies, the asset management firms, who are controlling the residential real estate market in the States and elsewhere.
At a certain point, I think your film actually even brings this up. I mean, at a certain point, there is a tipping point, right? Is it Saskia that brings it up? I think it might have been Saskia, although you also, no, it was Joseph Stiglitz. Joe Stiglitz, right?
Yeah.
Who's also in your film. It's a good thing to bring him up. I think he talks about how there's a certain point where you may, at a certain point, the economy, it just doesn't hold, obviously when there is some sort of chaos thrown into this formula that we've been talking about, like a pandemic.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden you have, tons of businesses, or rather tons of shops or restaurants or other kinds of companies going out of business, or where you're going to have a trend in the next few years. I think of many companies when their leases end saying, well, this isn't ideal, but we can run the business without leasing, tens of thousands of dollars worth of buildings, or, floors in a building. I just think that the development in the economy, real estate economy in New York, which is one of the main girders of the economy, and I'm sure that's true in other cities, right? Isn't that going to throw things in a tailspin? How is
Do you
this?
want me to go, Fredrik?
I don't know. I just feel like maybe New York reinvents itself in the next generation, which it might have to. Maybe people will be able to one day afford to live in New York again.
Well, I mean, we are seeing some implications already that are maybe on the more positive side. Okay. Rents are decreasing a little bit in New York.
Really?
But it's like, exactly, and London too, but it's still completely unaffordable for the average person. So there's that. And then, as Fredrik always points out to me and to others, and I think he's so right, so we have to ask the question, why is the stock market doing so brilliantly in this moment? There's a real disconnect between these financial actors and what people experience and feel on the ground. So I don't think the pandemic is the panacea to the housing crisis. I would have thought it would be. And I certainly, when the pandemic hit, I was still rapporteur, and I was very clear that if you have stay-home policies, physical distance policies, and wash your hand policies, which every country in the world pretty much adopted, that then the global housing crisis had to be solved. That's the logical extension and conclusion of that World Health Organization policy. I was wrong because some lives are more expendable than others. And I forgot about that. So I don't think we're seeing, well, we can let, Fredrik, why don't you talk about dry powder?
Yeah, no, I mean, the big story and the big revelation for me making the film was to understand the role of the 2008 financial crisis that actually created a new kind of landlord. So these hedge funds, they didn't own homes before, and so when they started to like vultures, they are vulture funds. They were out picking up undervaluated assets, very often assets sitting in banks. So they entered in 2011, 2012, like almost 4 years later. Blackstone entered and quite soon became the biggest landlord in the US, but also in Ireland or in Spain and all over the world. So they were prepared for a downfall of the economy, and they had a lot of money to move in. And now when we are in this new financial crisis, which is not a financial crisis, but it's a crisis for everybody else except them. But the CEO of Blackstone, this private equity fund, which is the biggest one, and Steven Schwartzman, who is a good friend of Trump, who was also his chief economic advisor, Steven Schwartzman said recently that Blackstones are sitting on 150 trillion of dry powder, meaning they're sitting on a big chunk of money ready to go in when it's time. And probably it's not time now. The time might come in a few years when also ordinary people are losing their jobs and can't pay their mortgages, and then they have to sell, and then the prices might go down, and then there's a moment for them to come in. So we don't even know where we're going still, because a lot of homeowners are still now feeling that they are okay, because there's been some support from the government and so on, but we don't know what will happen in a few years, because it's obviously that we don't make more money. Our salaries are not going up at all, the wages, but the people with money, like the wealthy people, they are richer than ever. This income inequality gap is growing year by year, and now during the COVID is growing even more. And of course, this is something we have to look out for. And so I also hope that this film push can be used in a US debate about these issues, so people can sharpen their eyes to what's going on. You have to look around your own neighborhood and see, who are the players here? Who are they? What are they doing? So that's I think knowledge is the way to fight back, and the film is part of this knowledge creation. That's why we also then continue now with the Pushback Talks, this podcast that we're doing, so we can deepen and also update the story meanwhile. Because I think there's a lot of things that I didn't know about when I started to make the film. There is like a big cloud of things happening, but it's really hard to explain it. But suddenly we took it step by step, and we tried also to make it in a language that also me myself understand. I'm not trying to make it in a language that is too far away from myself. And I like simple and clear language, and I think that's what we have in the film. And this is changing things. And I mean, I think basically also Leilani's main argument all the time is housing is a human right. That very simple combination of words is making a hell of a difference. So you can hear that groups all over the world are now taking this into their mouth. Also, journalists are doing it more. Politicians are doing it more. I mean, we already heard AOC using it, so it's coming also. Housing is a human right, and the language we've heard for a long time is housing and market housing market. So it's about our homes.
Right.
It's a fundamental human right.
Right. I think we're at an interesting intersection, or we're approaching an interesting intersection, where the American concept of what it is to be American historically has been all about, right, entrepreneurial, individualistic, and it, at some level, it just runs against this concept of human rights, like a minimal salary. Well, first and foremost, a home, a job, and to have a minimal quality of life. This idea that this should just be the default. It's going to take kind of just a leap, because and I was hoping maybe this election would be it. Clearly, we're not ready.
But you're talking about entrepreneurs, and I think we should love entrepreneurs. But these guys, you can't say that Blackstone are entrepreneurs, or the people buying into their private equity funds, because they don't even know what they're buying into. So it's the disconnection between the house and the money floating in is so big. So nobody really knows what's happening, and you don't even know who owns your building. And this is something new in history. And we have to understand this is a totally new step, and we have to fight it.
Yeah.
And I think you in the US are in a really interesting place right now. I hear what you say, Adam, completely about the history of the US, but that history is only for some people. I mean, redlining, decimated and has continued to decimate the wealth of Black and brown people.
This is the design of neighborhoods, of towns, cities by developers and politicians, right?
Yeah, enabling some people to own homes and others to not. And those some people were white, and those others were not white, or brown and Black people, and really not offered home ownership. home ownership in the US has been a big driver of wealth. It's how you get intergenerational wealth, right? You own a home and you build equity in that home.
That's right.
And you pay off the mortgage and then you give it to your kids. Well, Black and brown people, African Americans, Hispanic people in the US haven't had those advantages, but they're rising up and they're on the streets and they're calling it out for what it is. So you have that movement happening, which is it's not just about the criminal justice system and how horrible it is. It's very much about wealth inequality and housing discrimination. That's what they're talking about. I've talked to a lot of Americans recently about these issues, and they all name housing and discriminatory policies in housing as a big aspect of the Black Lives Matter movement. So you've got that going on. And then I'm now being approached a lot by Americans. In fact, I'm doing something on October the 5th with a legislator in Connecticut, of all places, where they're wanting to legislate the right to housing. They want to become the first state
Set a precedent.
to have the right to housing and legislation, and they want to end homelessness. So I feel things are percolating. Connecticut. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I'll tell you more after October 5th.
Yeah.
But it's coming from the legislator. It's not coming from me. It's not driven by me. They've heard about the right to housing. They've heard about my work. I'm joining them. But my idea is that things are percolating. And I think a film like Push it emboldens people. It's like, hey, I'm not alone. Hey, there is actually something big here at play that we need to address. So, I mean, I'm really hopeful a lot of people will go out and see it, because I think it does empower people to kind of feel like they can do something about this.
You want people to see the film? Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting idea. Okay.
What do you think, Fredrik?
It opens tomorrow. It's opening September 25th. I was going to say, by the way, when I mentioned before this entrepreneurial spirit, it's just a thing that we, I don't know if it's part of a conspiracy to kind of, if it's intended to kind of be a phony things, but this American, metal, that this is the idea, is that you pull yourself up on the bootstrap. Anybody has the opportunity, and once you get to these states, immigrants and people that lived here, and I'm saying it's essentially works for those people you described and doesn't work for the other people you described. I mean, it's when things are set up against entire groups of people, I agree with you. I'm just talking about this concept, which is mostly BS, I guess. This
certainly, if you were to ask African Americans and Hispanic people in the United States if the American dream exists, they would say that dream is a long ago thing that really very, very rarely benefited.
Right, but it makes people feel bad and less than when they can't achieve, and they're wondering what's wrong with me. And the message here is actually nothing. Nothing.
I can tell you a story from when we showed the film. Actually, a year ago, we had a festival premiere in San Francisco at the Castro. It was amazing. A lot of people were actually in the cinema, and there was a young woman coming up to me after the film, and she said, "Oh, Fredrik, I feel less lonely now, because when I see this film, I understand it's not my fault. It's not my fault. I wasn't smart enough. This is a part of a global story. My problem is shared by many else." And I think it's important to talk about the Afro-Americans and the Latinos, but I think this issue is even much bigger than this. I mean, most young people, if you don't have money in your family, are stuck in the same things. Some older people are still in kind of, they have their house, they're paying the mortgages, it works. But for young people, I mean, I don't know how many kids you have, but if you have a number of kids, can you really afford to help them out? It's kind of hard, and this is the story for many Americans, not only Afro-Americans and Latinos. So it's a big issue, and the stress is everywhere. The stress is everywhere.
Well, again, the name of the documentary is called Push, and it's directed by Fredrik Gertten and stars Leilani Farha.
Yes.
And also, we didn't mention Robert Saviano, but we did mention Saskia
Sasson.
Sasson.
Yeah.
And Joseph Stiglitz is in the film, and famous economist. It's a thoroughly watchable and important documentary. So virtually available as of the 25th of September. Where, for instance, do you know which theaters are virtually screening it?
You should go to the website pushthefilm.com. There is pushthefilm.com. There you can find all information about the US release.
Right.
So it's through theaters all over the country, but you can also watch it yourself at home. So it's all there from tomorrow. And Adam, I can see your time is running out, but you have to give us a good quote why people should watch this film.
Oh, I thought I just did. It's a thoroughly.
Yeah, it sounds boring. It sounds boring.
Because this affects
Utterly
everybody.
watchable.
It's utterly watchable.
Watchable. I mean, it sounds really boring.
No, it's anything but. No, I mean, I out of all the documentaries that I watch, I reached out to you guys because I thought this was it's an essential documentary for the moment. I mean, we're at, like I said, I believe we're approaching an intersection or crossroads, and this film really puts it all in a nutshell.
That's a better quote.
I like that. Essential documentary for the moment. Love it.
It is.
Yeah.
And, you know, it will unveil, why are you feeling so screwed lately? Watch the film and it kind of clarifies. It's a big aha film, you know. I mean, it's, again, as like I said at the very top, you know, I've been thinking about these issues for a long time. And even though I know why I left New York City recently, I still kind of grapple with, you know, I don't know, did I abandon New York? No. So I really, really care about, I really care. The film really affected me. So.
Can I just add one thing, Adam?
Please do.
A number of people have suggested that the film doesn't delve into positive solutions and how we can address all of this. And I mean, Fredrik can speak to that from the point of view as a filmmaker, but just as someone who was integrally involved in the film, what I would say to that is, you know, I've been an advocate for most of my life, my adult working life, and the way that you make change is to know what needs to be changed. That's the first step. You can't make change if you don't know what's causing the problem or who is causing the problem. And what I loved about Push was it enables us to understand in a really accessible way what the problem is. People can't afford to live in cities. They're being pushed out. And who's causing the problem? The big financial actors. And people don't know that. There's a real aha moment for most people who watch the film. That's the starting point for change.
And I can tell you, Adam, that the film has already made some impact. So, for example, in Copenhagen, in Denmark, where we had the world premiere, Leilani was in the media all the time because Blackstone had bought in big into Copenhagen, and in a very aggressive way. Now, this 1st of July, Denmark has a new legislation, and they call it Lex Blackstone. So they're actually trying to make it more difficult for Blackstone and other hedge funds to extract values from Denmark. Germany, Berlin has the same legislation. It's now coming up also in Spain, in Barcelona. So the film is a part of this kind of debate. And we can see this, I mean, also in Canada, the film has been showed a lot. And Leilani is a very important player in Canadian politics. So I think the film is doing a great job also in my own country, Sweden, and in many other countries. The film makes people talk about the issues in a new way. And that's really important.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you, Leilani and Fredrik. We'll do this again, I hope.
You're welcome back.
It's really nice to talk to you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.